Hi students. The next law of exponents we are going to look at is the zero exponent law. So if you want to take a moment to pause your video to jot this down, today our learning target is how is an expression with a zero exponent simplified? So the law, when you have a zero exponent, I'm going to go ahead and show you using variables first. So if we take any number and we'll use the variable a to represent any number, and if I take and rise that to the zero power, so I have an exponent of 0, that is always going to be equal to 1. So that is your next exponent law, okay, that you will be responsible for knowing. So why does any number risen to the 0 power equal 1? So let me kind of do a little proof here for you. If I think of a number, and I'm going to call it W, okay, so W can represent any number. Let's say that I square that number, and then I'm going to go ahead and divide it by itself. So if I have any number W squared divided by W squared, what that's going to work out to be is W squared. If I write that in standard form, okay, that's going to give me W times W, and then divided by W times W, okay? And then we know that any number divided by itself is always equal to 1. So I can cancel those W's out. They'll equal 1. And then same with this. W divided by W is another 1. 1 times 1 is going to give us 1. Now, you have not learned this yet. You will 2 lessons from now. But actually, when we are dividing integers that have the same base, we are going to be subtracting those integers. So you'll see that in a few lessons. So another way that I could think about this is writing it as W to the 2 minus 2 power, or W to the 0 power. And as you can see here, that equals 1. Okay, so any number divided by itself is going to give you 1. All right, so let's look at a couple examples of this now with some numbers, and then with a combination of numbers and variables. So just real basic, if I start with a 2 and I take any number, so 2 to the 0 power, regardless of what that base is, it's always going to be 1. If I take 5 to the 0 power, still going to equal 1. If I take 100 to the 0 power, still going to equal 1. So it doesn't matter what that base is. If you're taking it to the 0 power, then the answer will always be 1. Let's take a negative base. So we've talked about the importance of whether we have parentheses around that base, that negative, or not. In this case, we do. So if I am taking a base of negative 4 to the 0 power, still going to be 1. But be careful if you do not have that base in parentheses. If you have something that looks like this, where that negative is not in parentheses, then we're taking 4 to the 0 power, which we know is 1, and they're taking actually the opposite of that. So in this case, that would give you a negative 1, because that negative is not in parentheses. Okay, so you're taking 4 to the 0 power, and you're taking the opposite of that. So that situation would give you a negative 1. So be careful, again, with those negatives and whether or not they're in parentheses. Another example, let's take a look at when we have something like 3 times x to the 0 power. In this case, we're taking x to the 0 power, and then we are multiplying that by 3. So if you see a coefficient, a number here, and a variable directly next to it, that means multiplication, even though you might not put the multiplication symbol in there. So what this really means is I am taking 3 times x to the 0 power, or 3 times, and x to the 0 power is still, we know, to be 1. So any number to the 0 power is always 1. So this breaks down into 3 times 1, which is going to give you 3. So 3x to the 0 power is equal to 3. And then it works the same way if you have negative 3 times x to the 0 power. I do not have this negative 3 in parentheses, okay? So again, I'm taking negative 3 times x to the 0 power. X to the 0 power is 1, so it's like I'm taking negative 3 times 1, and that equals -3. So again, be watchful of those negatives, okay? This is a common mistake that a lot of students tend to make